The sky over the Varon homeworld was ablaze. Cracks of energy split the atmosphere as the Rakul fleet rained fire down on the fragile cities below. Streets that had once teemed with life now lay shattered, dust and debris swirling in the air. The Varon, once peaceful and serene, scattered in desperation. Their cries for help went unheard, reverberating through the vast silence of the Galactic Union's council chambers. To the galaxy, they were insignificant, just another weak race in a corner of space no one cared about. In orbit, the Aurora hovered in the blackness, its engines humming softly as Captain Emma Reyes stood at the helm. The distress signal from the Varon had come hours ago, and Reyes had made the call without hesitation. Against all warnings, she brought her fleet to their aid. Now, as the battered world spun beneath her, she couldn't shake the feeling of impending catastrophe. "Captain, we're in visual range of the Varon capital," Commander Harris announced, breaking the tense silence on the bridge. Reyes nodded, her eyes fixed on the hollow display in front of her. The devastation was worse than she imagined. "Bring us in closer," she ordered. Her voice was steady, but the weight of the decision pressed on her. Earth had no political stake here, no alliance to protect, and yet they were risking everything. "Do you really think this is wise?" Harris's voice dropped, just loud enough for her to hear. "We're already stretched thin. If the Rakul engage us..." Reyes turned, her sharp gaze meeting his. "We didn't come all this way to sit by and watch an entire species get wiped out. We're here to help. End of discussion." Harris straightened, though his unease was clear. "Understood, Captain?" She returned her attention to the hologram, but her mind raced. Earth was new to the galactic stage, barely a century into their interstellar presence. Other species viewed them as upstarts, arrogant in their moral high ground. Perhaps there was some truth to it, but Reyes knew this was more than just a statement. It was a test of what kind of people they would be. The fleet maneuvered into position, and Reyes could feel the hum of activity throughout the ship as preparations were made to deploy aid workers and engineers to the planet below. Her pulse quickened. This was the moment of truth. The Aurora had its share of advanced technology, much of it still classified, but its primary mission had always been exploration and peacekeeping. War wasn't their goal, but it seemed inevitable now. "Captain," Lieutenant Anders called from the comms station. "Incoming transmission from the Rakul." Reyes stiffened. She knew what was coming. "Patch it through." The hollow display shifted, revealing the cold, angular features of a Rakul commander. His crimson eyes glared down at her, filled with disdain. "Human!" He spat the word like venom. "You have no place here. Leave now, or face annihilation." Reyes stood tall, unfazed by the threat. "This is a humanitarian mission. We are here to assist the Varon. We won't engage unless provoked." The Rakul commander sneered. "Assist them? They are weak, unworthy of survival. And you, mere insects playing at war. If you interfere, we will crush you. Then you'll have to go through us," Reyes replied, her tone icy. She cut the transmission before he could respond, her jaw clenched tight. "Prepare the fleet for possible engagement." Around her, the crew moved into action, though the tension was palpable. Harris approached again, lowering his voice. "We can't win this fight, Emma. We're outnumbered and outgunned." Reyes exhaled slowly. "We don't need to win. We just need to hold them off long enough to get the Varon to safety." She paused, glancing at the devastation below. "And maybe, just maybe, show the galaxy what we're capable of." As the first wave of Rakul fighters broke formation and descended toward them, the Aurora shuddered. The battle had begun. Reyes' heart pounded, but there was no room for fear. She had made her choice, and now they would live or die by it. "All hands prepare for combat. Release the defensive grid." Outside the ship, panels slid open, revealing rows of sleek, hidden turrets. It was time to show the galaxy that Earth wasn't just here to watch. The Aurora and her fleet roared to life, bright flashes lighting up the void as the Rakul ships closed in. Reyes gripped the edge of her console, her eyes burning with resolve. She had no idea if they would survive this, but one thing was certain: humanity wouldn't back down from doing the right thing. Not today. The first volley from the Recul fighters struck hard, rattling the Aurora's hull. Captain Reyes braced herself against the console as alarms blared across the bridge. The cold blue glow of the holographic display flickered with red warning icons, marking the areas of impact. "They're hitting us harder than we anticipated," Harris shouted over the noise, his fingers flying over the control panel. "Shields at 70%. Reyes didn't flinch. "Divert auxiliary power to the shields and prepare countermeasures. We need to hold the line." The tension in the air was thick as the crew moved with precision, each person locked in their role, but the fear was undeniable. They were facing an enemy with superior numbers and technology. Outgunned was an understatement. But Reyes had seen worse odds before. "Deploy the drones," she ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Set them to intercept and engage." Dozens of small, autonomous drones shot out from the belly of the ship, fanning out in perfect formation. They zipped toward the incoming Recul fighters like a swarm of angry hornets, weaving between laser fire and missile trails. The drones weren't heavily armed, but their speed and maneuverability were enough to disrupt the enemy's assault patterns. On the holo display, Reyes watched as the first wave of Recul's ships faltered, caught off guard by the humans' unconventional tactics. A deep rumble shook the ship again as another barrage slammed into the Aurora. "Shields down to 50%, Harris warned, beads of sweat forming on his brow. Reyes clenched her jaw. They couldn't sustain this kind of assault much longer. Her gaze flicked to the planet below, where the Varon were still scrambling to evacuate their cities. Time was running out. "Anders, report from the surface?" Lieutenant Anders' voice crackled through the comms. "Captain, we've deployed half of the aid teams, but the Recul ground forces are closing in fast. We're not sure how much longer we can hold them off." Reyes' mind raced. The humanitarian mission was slipping into a full-scale war, and they weren't ready for this kind of escalation. But turning back wasn't an option. Not anymore. "Send the remaining aid workers down," she commanded. "Focus on securing critical locations. Harris, activate the ship's tactical AI. We need every advantage we can get." As the AI interface blinked to life, Reyes felt a flicker of hope. Earth's ships had one thing the rest of the galaxy didn't expect: ingenuity. They may have been underestimated, but that was about to change. "AI online. Tactical analysis running," the calm, monotone voice of the AI announced. On the holo display, new projections began to appear, showing optimal defense routes, enemy weaknesses, and potential counterstrikes. Reyes took it all in with a sharp eye. She had always been a strategist, someone who thrived on thinking 3 steps ahead. Now was no different. "We're going to split their forces," Reyes declared, the plan taking shape in her mind. "Anders, redirect the drones to push the Recul fighters toward the western sector. We'll feign a retreat in that direction." Harris frowned. "And then what?" Reyes allowed herself a brief, grim smile. "Then we surprise them." With the drones acting as bait, the Recul's ships eagerly followed, sensing a retreat. But it wasn't long before the trap was sprung. Earth's fleet had cloaked a secondary strike force within a debris field on the far side of the planet. As the Recul ships pursued the decoy, Reyes' hidden battalion uncloaked and unleashed a devastating barrage of kinetic missiles. The Recul didn't know what hit them. "Direct hit!" Harris shouted, his tone shifting from fear to exhilaration. "Their lead ships are down." Reyes remained focused, though a wave of satisfaction rolled through her. This was what she had been waiting for, a chance to show the galaxy that Earth wasn't some naive, fledgling species. They had prepared for this. But the moment of triumph was short-lived. The comms crackled again, and Anders' voice was strained. "Captain, we have a problem." "What is it?" Reyes asked, her stomach tightening. "The Varon, something's happening down here. Their civilians are starting to change." Reyes frowned, glancing at Harris, who looked equally confused. "Change how?" "It's like they're drawing energy from the planet itself," Anders continued, his voice tinged with disbelief. "They're glowing, and their physical strength is increasing. I've never seen anything like it. For a brief moment, Reyes was speechless. She had heard rumors of some species having deep, almost mystical connections to their homeworlds, but this? It was unprecedented. Can they fight? She asked, a glimmer of hope surfacing. Anders hesitated. It looks like it. Whatever's happening, it's giving them some kind of power. They're not just evacuating anymore, they're engaging the Rakul ground forces. Reyes leaned back, absorbing the weight of the revelation. The Varon, the very race everyone had left for dead, were starting to fight back. And not just in desperation, they were winning. A new surge of determination filled her chest. Harris, keep the pressure on the Rakul ships. Anders, support the Varon however you can. She knew this battle wasn't over. Far from it. But they had just gained an unexpected advantage, one the Rakul would never see coming. The Aurora shook again, but this time, it wasn't fear that gripped the crew. It was hope. The battlefield stretched across the plains of Varon's homeworld, a broken landscape littered with scorched ground and smoldering wreckage. The Rakul forces, once confident in their superiority, now found themselves facing not just Earth's unexpected strength but a newly empowered enemy. The Varon, glowing faintly with the energy drawn from their planet, moved with a speed and grace that defied everything the galaxy knew about them. From her position on the bridge of the Aurora, Captain Reyes watched the chaotic feed from the surface, her mind racing as she tried to make sense of it all. The Varon, fragile and passive just hours ago, had become warriors in their own right. She couldn't deny the awe that stirred within her, but neither could she ignore the urgency of the situation. This was far from over. Status on the Rakul fleet? She asked, turning to Harris, whose focus remained on the tactical display. They're regrouping, but they've lost over a third of their forces, he reported. They didn't expect a two-front battle. Their ground units are in disarray. Reyes nodded, her gaze hardening. Good. Let's keep it that way. She knew they couldn't afford to let up now. The Rakul were relentless, and if they managed to recover, they'd return with even more firepower. The humans in Varon had caught them off guard, but that advantage wouldn't last forever. Anders, how are we looking on the ground? Reyes called through the comms. There was a brief pause before Anders' voice crackled back. The Varon are, it's hard to explain, Captain. They're not just fighting, they're channeling something. We've seen them take hits that should have killed them, but they keep going. It's like they're drawing power from the planet itself. Rakul forces are falling back. Reyes' mind reeled. She had never heard of anything like this, not even in the most obscure reports from the Galactic Union. Stay close to them, she ordered. We need to learn as much as we can. As she spoke, the bridge shuddered violently. The hum of the engines deepened, and alarms shrieked through the ship. Harris stumbled as he gripped the edge of his console. Direct hit! Enemy frigates are targeting our main power core. Reyes spun toward the display. 3 Rakul ships had broken formation and were bearing down on the Aurora, their weapons locked. The sleek lines of the enemy vessels glowed a menacing red, and she knew they weren't going to let her ship survive much longer unless they acted fast. Evasive maneuvers! All power to shields! Reyes shouted, her heart pounding. Fire at will! The Aurora banked hard to port, its hull groaning under the strain. Streams of plasma fire lanced across the void, narrowly missing the bridge. Harris barked orders to the gunners, and the ship's turrets erupted in return, lighting up the darkness with bolts of energy that slammed into the enemy frigates. They're persistent, Harris muttered through clenched teeth. They're desperate, Reyes corrected, her eyes narrowing. They know if we hold the line here, it's over for them. The tactical AI chimed in, its monotone voice unnervingly calm amidst the chaos. Enemy vessels are adjusting attack vector. Recommend counter-strike with concentrated fire on their propulsion systems. Reyes didn't hesitate. Target their engines. Now! The gunners responded with deadly precision, focusing their fire on the rear thrusters of the lead Rakul ship. The impact was immediate. A brilliant explosion tore through the enemy frigate, sending debris spiraling into space. The remaining two ships veered off, their formations broken. "We got one!" Harris shouted, a rare grin splitting his face. Reyes didn't share his moment of relief. She knew better. One victory wasn't enough. "Keep pressure on the others," she ordered, her tone sharp. "Don't let them regroup." The Aurora surged forward, its guns blazing as it pressed the attack. Reyes watched the display, her heart pounding as the two remaining Rakul ships faltered under the relentless assault. It was working, but it was far from over. Suddenly, Anders' voice came through the comms again, this time more urgent. "Captain, we've got movement on the ground. The Rakul are deploying reinforcements. Looks like they're pulling everything they've got." Reyes stiffened. Reinforcements meant more trouble, and they were already stretched thin. "Can the Varon hold them off?" "They're trying, but these new forces are heavily armored," Anders replied, the strain clear in his voice. "We're going to need more than just raw power to stop them." Reyes' mind raced, searching for a solution. The Varon had proven themselves capable fighters, but they were still outmatched by the Rakul's advanced technology. It wasn't enough to rely on brute force. They needed strategy. "Harris, I want every available drone redirected to the surface," Reyes said suddenly, her plan forming in real time. "We'll use them to disrupt the Rakul's armor units. Scatter their formations." Harris raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. "On it." As the drones deployed, Reyes leaned over the comms console. "Anders, get the Varon to focus their efforts on taking out the Rakul infantry. Let the drones handle the armor. If we split them up, we can isolate their forces and overwhelm them." "Understood, Captain," Anders replied, the sound of gunfire echoing behind him. Reyes straightened, her pulse steadying as the plan fell into place. They weren't out of this fight yet. The Rakul had underestimated them, underestimated humanity and the Varon both. And now, they were paying the price. The final push was coming. She could feel it. As the Aurora launched another volley, Reyes knew one thing with absolute certainty: they would win this battle. Not because of their technology, not because of their numbers, but because they refused to abandon those who needed them most. No matter the odds. The bridge trembled again, but this time, it wasn't the weight of fear that filled the room. It was the thrill of victory just within reach. The battle had reached its tipping point. On the surface of the Varon homeworld, the once serene plains were now a chaotic war zone of shattered rock and smoldering metal. Rakul reinforcements surged in waves, their armored units cutting a path through the beleaguered Varon and human forces. Overhead, the sky was alive with streaks of energy and the thunderous rumble of explosions. Captain Reyes gripped the edge of her console aboard the Aurora, her gaze locked on the hollow display. It showed the entire battlefield, the Rakul forces advancing, the Varon fighting desperately to hold them back, and the human drones weaving through enemy lines. Yet, despite everything, the Rakul were still pressing forward. "We need to break their formation now," Reyes muttered under her breath. She couldn't afford to let them regroup, not with the Varon already pushed to their limits. Harris, standing nearby, glanced at her. "We've done everything we can from up here, Captain. If we don't make a decisive move soon, they'll overrun our positions." Reyes nodded, her mind racing. The Varon had revealed their latent power, drawing strength from the planet itself, but even that wasn't enough to stop the relentless Rakul war machine. The humans had held them off longer than anyone had expected, but this final push required more than clever tactics. "We're going down there," Reyes said suddenly, her voice cutting through the tense atmosphere on the bridge. Harris blinked, caught off guard. "What? You mean, to the surface?" Reyes stood, straightening her uniform with grim determination. "We're not just commanders from afar, Harris. We need to be with them, lead from the front. If the Varon are going to have any chance of survival, they need to see that we stand with them." Harris hesitated, but then he saw the resolve in her eyes. He exhaled sharply. "I'll prep the dropship." As the crew scrambled to prepare for their descent, Reyes looked one last time at the tactical display. The drones had done their job, scattering the Rakul's heavy armor, but now the true fight would be won on the ground. She could feel the weight of every life hanging in the balance, but she had made her choice. Humanity wasn't here just to offer aid. They were here to stand and fight, no matter the cost. The dropship's engines roared as it plunged through the atmosphere. Reyes sat at the front, her heart steady despite the chaos outside. Through the narrow viewport, she could see the battle below, bright flashes of energy fire, dark plumes of smoke, and the distant glow of the Varon, their bodies still pulsing with that strange energy. The Rakul forces were concentrated near the capital city, pushing through in a last-ditch effort to take control. "We're coming in hot!" the pilot shouted over the comms. The dropship shook violently as they passed through the lower atmosphere, but Reyes kept her focus. Her mind raced through 1,000 possibilities, each one more desperate than the last. But then her thoughts crystallized into a single, unshakable certainty. This was where they would make their stand. The dropship landed hard, kicking up dust and debris as its rear ramp dropped open. Reyes was the first to step out, her boots hitting the scorched earth. Around her, human soldiers poured out, their weapons raised, ready to face whatever came next. The air smelled of burning metal and charred soil, and the distant rumble of explosions was deafening. "Captain, this way!" Anders waved her over from behind a makeshift barricade. He was covered in dirt and blood, but his eyes were sharp with determination. Reyes moved quickly, crouching beside him. "Status?" "The Varon are holding the line, but barely," Anders said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Whatever energy they're drawing from the planet, it's keeping them going. But the Rakul are overwhelming them with numbers." Reyes glanced over the ridge, where the Varon stood against the Rakul onslaught. Their glowing forms shimmered like living shields, but they were outnumbered, and the Rakul's heavy artillery was cutting through their defenses. "We need to take out that artillery," Reyes said, her eyes narrowing. "If we don't, it's over." Anders nodded grimly. "We've tried. Every approach is covered. They've got snipers, drones, the works." Reyes' mind worked quickly. "What about the Varon? Can they get us close enough?" Anders hesitated. "Maybe. But they're not soldiers, Captain. They're fighting for their lives." Reyes clenched her jaw. "Then we'll fight with them." She stood and waved to the nearby Varon commander, a tall figure glowing faintly in the dim light. "We need to take out the artillery," she called, her voice cutting through the din of battle. "Can your people help us?" The Varon commander looked at her with wide, luminous eyes, then nodded slowly. "We will try." Together, humans and Varon advanced, moving in unison across the battlefield. Reyes felt the tension rise with every step, the air thick with the heat of battle. Energy bolts zipped past, explosions rocked the ground beneath them, but they pressed on, closer and closer to the Rakul artillery line. At the last moment, the Varon unleashed their full power. The ground beneath them trembled as the energy of their planet surged through them, forming a barrier of raw force that shielded the humans from the incoming fire. Reyes and her soldiers rushed forward, using the Varon's cover to close the distance. The Rakul artillery fell silent, their guns destroyed in a series of rapid strikes. The enemy forces, caught off guard by the combined human and Varon assault, broke ranks and began to retreat. Reyes stood in the midst of the battlefield, her chest heaving with exhaustion, but her heart swelling with triumph. The Rakul were retreating. The Varon were still standing. It was over. She turned to the Varon commander, meeting his gaze. "We did it," she said quietly. The Varon nodded, a faint smile on his face. "Because you came." As Reyes watched the Rakul flee, she knew this was more than just a victory. It was a promise that humanity would never turn away from those in need. Not now, not ever. The battle was won, but the future had only just begun.